This podcast was produced by OAR FM Dunedin with support from New Zealand On Air.
Ever wondered what it's like to go through life having no childhood, with a brain that has almost completely rewired itself? In this podcast series, I will explore some of the ways adults with childhood traumatic brain injuries experience life through a unique lens and what makes them so magically distinct in this world of ours. I'm Leeann Barnett. Welcome to Headstrong, a life with traumatic brain injury. Reality. My days will be laden with compromise. I will have to endure the ignorance and prejudice of others, family, friends and strangers alike. Never to know the pleasures of fingers that work, nor the freedom to learn uninhibited as my days turn anti-clockwise. I live in someone else's body. I walk in someone else's shoes. I've the past of a dead child. But I hold a wealth of knowledge. Filled with the power of strength, I am guided by will and courage, and full of pride. Conceived in a dirty white gutter, bound to an eternity to both face and offer challenge. Living with traumatic brain injury and its day-to-day implications is not something most people understand. For people like me, there are multiple comorbidities, is what the professionals refer to it as, or impairments, disabilities. You take your pick. There's plenty of names. But I want to tell you what it's like from moment to moment, day to day, and how we have to get through things. For me, one of the biggest things I deal with is fatigue. Fatigue is not just a little bit of feeling tired. It's more consuming than that. If you were to take a paragraph and say it out loud, let's say your kids are on holiday and you're going to take them to see The Princess and the Pea. So you say, I'm taking my kids to see The Princess and the Pea these holidays and I hope they really enjoy it. I want you to say that. I want you to say that like you really mean it. But now I want you to say it so every word is said 3 times. I, am, gonna, take. The whole paragraph. After that, I want you to stop and think, how do you feel? Because that will be tiresome. It'll be frustrating. It will make your brain want to explode. Well, that is how much energy my brain expends every moment of every day and everything it does. From taking in visual stimuli, from reading, from thinking, from planning, from movement, speaking, you name it. And that's why I get so tired. And it's just one aspect that many of us with severe brain injuries have to live with. The consequences of fatigue getting out of control can be horrendous. It will mean I will have days in bed. If I am going to do an activity that will tire me out, I have to make sure that there is up to a week of nothing coming at the other end of it because I won't be able to get up and do much. On top of that, we have to focus all our energies on dealing with other impairments. One of the others for me is epilepsy. I don't have the most commonly thought of seizures called tonic-clonics. I have something called complex partial or focal impaired awareness, and they're rather bizarre seizures. I can look into space for a few seconds. It's like someone having suction cups on the back of my eyes pulling into the back of my head. And then all of a sudden I'm right. I can make strange noises, I can walk around, do all sorts of funny things, and they can happen at any time, any moment, but they tire me out. And sometimes people don't even know I'm having them. When I do have them and they are noticeable, I get odd looks from people who think I'm strange and bizarre or having a psychotic moment. I also have this thing called neurogenic pain. Occasionally I don't have any pain, but more often than not I do. Right now I'm sitting at the microphone and on my left leg, left thigh to be precise, there is a shooting pain going up and down it. I can't describe it clearly because it's odd. There's nothing wrong with my thigh. It's just my brain misfiring. Doesn't always mean that it's going to be in my thigh. It sometimes is in my ankles, it's in my hands, it's in my shoulders, or any part of my body. But there's nothing you can do about it except take medication, which makes you drowsy, and there's no reason for it. It's just my brain misfiring. Then there's the tetanus. When the tetanus is low, meaning buzzing in my ears, I can just annoy it. It's just irritating. But then there's the other days when it gets really loud and really piercing, and that hurts. Or it's frustrating to the point of all-consuming. On top of that, there's the headaches or the cluster headaches, and that's when you wake up every morning and a mild headache starts off and it increases as the time goes by. And there's nothing except taking more drugs that I can do about that. And even those drugs might not work. Well, then there's the cognitive impairment. This is where I get the response from people who quite often say, I do that, like misplacing items around the house. They don't misplace items around the house like I do. I do it to such an extreme that so many of the things like keys and whatnot else have to be put in a particular spot. Otherwise, it takes me weeks to find them. Then there's the forgetting things. Walking into a room, thinking I'm going to do something and not remembering what it is I'm going to do. There are times where that can happen to 20 times plus a day. There is much, much more that goes on. And this is what it is like every single day of my life. I don't get a break from it. I don't get to have time off. I just have to learn to smile and get on with it. Visual stimuli is a massive issue for me. Not only does it trigger my seizures, it impacts my migraine/cluster headaches, and it confuses my understanding of what's happening around me. Auditory can be a bit of a problem if there's too much going on, but visual is the biggest problem. I've learned to deal with that without even realising it. I know that when I'm at the Dunedin Art Gallery, I can't go to the front windows when it's sunny because the sun coming in quite often flickers in such a manner that it can cause a seizure. I know that when I'm in a car driving past, say, the poplar trees into Lawrence that I don't think are there anymore, I have to be very careful if the day is sunny because the way the sun shines through them can cause a seizure. I can't go to any major concerts at the stadium because the lighting is such that it would put me into multiple seizures. These are all of the things that I have to be aware and conscious of every day. Then there's society's lack of understanding. That's a huge impact. Growing up, it was more in your face, the discrimination that is. One story I like to tell people is when I left high school. I knew I was going to teachers college the next year, but like so many of my friends, I wanted to bum around over the summer. So I thought I'd go and get the dole, which you could do quite easily in those days. Well, I was sitting in front of this woman who was quite a terse older lady and giving my details over as I was being requested, when she turns around and says to me, "So, have you got anything wrong with you?" And I said, "Well, not wrong with me, but I do have epilepsy." At which point she fumbles around on her old computer. Remember, this is early 90s. And says, "I don't have anything in here that says that. I'm going to put it under psychological disorders." I thought that was a bit rough and was actually quite offended by it. I pointed out that it wasn't a psychological disorder, but a disorder of the nervous system. It made no difference. In those days, discrimination was in your face. Today, people try to tell me that it's much better. My experience is it's just subtle. It's still there. It's just not in your face. And people have learnt how to hide their discrimination. Businesses know how to get round employing people like me. Who wants to employ someone even though they're well-educated, tertiary educated, university educated, when they can't work more than 5 to 10 hours a week? They need a space where there is windows for natural lighting, because I can't go into an office space with neon lighting, where I need flexible work hours. They don't want to know about us, yet I have so many skills, so much to offer, and I am but one of thousands in the same position. So discrimination is still out there. Then there's people in your general sphere of life, and they don't realise that when they say things like "I do that," or "Oh, why don't you try this?" or "But you look fine, you don't sound like there's anything wrong with you," all has an impact. There's also those professionals out there who think they know better than those of us who live with disabilities. One of the people I put in the most highest regard ever is a man called Barry Longmore. He was a clinical neuropsychologist who first began to teach me when I was in my early 20s what it meant to live with a traumatic brain injury. The very first thing he ever said to me was, any professional who tries to tell you that they know more about disabilities, in particular your disability, isn't worth the piece of paper their name is written on. So, back in my early 30s, I wanted to go on outward bound. I'd worked hard on my fitness, I'd done a lot of work on myself in many areas, and I applied. Things were going okay. I had to get letters from various professionals around me. So I had one from a physiotherapist, one from a speech and language therapist, one from my GP, who I think at the time was the dean of the medical school and had been my GP all my life, and one from a psychiatrist who used to keep check on my various medications because of naturally being on a combination of antiepileptics and antidepressants. I chose to go and see him, all saying that I was more than capable of doing the 8-day able-bodied course at Outward Bound in Anakiwa. All of a sudden, a new person came in. She told me I couldn't go. She told me I, in my 30s, had to write a fatigue diary and keep track of it for her. I had to do a whole lot of other things that she felt I needed to do, because she didn't want me to get sent home, even though many able-bodied people who can't complete the course get sent home. She thought I couldn't figure out for myself what I was and wasn't able to do. It took 18 months for me to be able to go away on that course, and I completed it. I finished it, and I wasn't the slowest by any stretch of the imagination. But that's what able-bodied people do. They tell us how we should live. Another thing is understanding social cues, interpreting a room, and understanding what a person is saying to me. I quite often, and many people with brain injuries quite often, miss social cues. Interpreting someone's facial expressions, the tone in their voice, it's difficult. It takes a lot of thought. If I don't know someone, it's even harder. If I do know someone, I'm not so bad at it, but I still struggle. Even with my family, I struggle. Trying to regulate my own emotional reactions is something that is difficult for me. When my fatigue levels are at a peak, I can't do it easily, which means I have to remove myself from others. Even phone calls can be difficult. If someone gets up my goat, I can lash out verbally at least. So I just hide away in the house. There is a term called masking that the professionals use these days to describe people like me who are able to move within the community and not display that we have impairments or disabilities. I call it being a world-class bluff artist. This means I need those around me to reinforce that they have understood what I am saying, but also to help me to make sure that I know what they have said, because I need clear and concise instructions or interpretation of what it is that's being said to me. On a day that I am cognitively fatigued, I won't pick up nuances at all. I also struggle with words. I get them mixed up constantly. Earlier on, I talked about tinnitus. The word is actually tinnitus, but my brain didn't pick up earlier on that I had said the word wrong. It happens all the time, and it can be quite amusing for many people around me. Finally, I guess I should address what is it that others can do out there. How can they be more supportive of us? And it boils down to this: stop treating us like we're different. Don't think that we should have to hide how we feel, what has happened to us during the day. Able-bodied people can talk about their daily experience, good or bad, so can we. Get to know the person around you. Many of my close friends know how to pick my little seizures. They don't even acknowledge that they've seen them. They just know they've happened. If they see too many in a row, they can also see that I might be getting tired, and they'll just say to me on the side, "Oh, too tired, Leeann. Do you think you want to go home?" That's all you need to do. Just treat us like everybody else, but also be aware of what it is that we have to go through. So this is my lived experience, but there will be others out there around you who may be in a similar position, and you aren't aware of them. My advice is to create a positive and welcoming atmosphere to allow people to open up to you and talk to you so that you can get to know the whole person and they don't have to live in silence anymore. You've been listening to Headstrong, a life with traumatic brain injury. In the next episode, I'll talk to a parent of an adult who sustained a severe traumatic brain injury as a child and explore how it impacted their whānau. If you'd like to listen again or hear other episodes of Headstrong, you'll find it at oar.org.nz or your favourite podcast platform. Thanks to Brain Injury New Zealand, Paula Schoenfeld, and especially OAR FM for making this series possible.
This podcast was produced by OAR FM Dunedin with support from New Zealand On the Air.